If you had asked me a year ago who I was, I would have lied. I would have smiled, maybe, and said something small, something safe. I'm Emma, I'd tell you, just an ordinary woman from the city. I would never have told you the truth, that I am a runner. That I run not for joy or health or freedom, but because there's always something behind me, breathing down my neck. Grief. Guilt. The echo of voices that say I'm too much, or never enough, that's why I'm here, alone, in a crumbling farmhouse. 3 hours from anything resembling civilization, sitting at my kitchen table and listening to the storm batter the windows. Outside, the wind screams across the empty fields. Inside, the only sound is my own breath, coming too fast, too shallow. My phone buzzes with messages I won't answer. Friends from the city want to know if I'm adjusting. Family wants to know if I'll come back. They don't understand that I didn't just leave, I escaped. Sometimes I think I came out here to disappear. Sometimes, on nights like this, I wonder if I already have that I haven't spoken aloud in almost 2 days, not even to myself. My horse, Storm, is the only soul who knows I'm here. He's young, restless, unpredictable, and the only living thing on this property who hasn't asked me for anything I can't give. Or so I thought. Lightning forks across the black sky. The kitchen lights flicker. I press my back to the cold wall and try to ground myself, counting, breathing, watching the rain smear the world into watercolors. My chest is tight, my head pounding. I know what this is, anxiety, like a shadow with its hands around my throat. I should check on Storm. I know this. But every time I look outside, the storm seems worse, like the darkness itself is alive and waiting for me to step into it. I close my eyes and tell myself that horses are fine in bad weather. That Storm is fine. That I don't need to move, don't need to care, don't need to feel. Then I hear it, a cry from the barn. Not a whinny. Something lower, sharper, a sound I've never heard from him before. It cuts through the wind and the thunder, shattering my numbness. I sit up, heart pounding. The hair on my arms stands on end. I want to ignore it. I want to stay safe in my kitchen, wrapped in fear and silence. But Storm calls again, and something inside me breaks. I grab my boots, shoving trembling feet into the worn leather, not bothering with a jacket. The wind slaps my face the moment I step outside. Cold and wild. The yard is a swamp, mud sucking at my heels, rain stinging my skin. I move on instinct, eyes half closed, hands outstretched like I'm walking through a dream. The barn door creaks, swinging on rusty hinges. My flashlight throws jagged shadows across the walls. I can't see him at first, just hear the frantic thumping of hooves, the heavy, panicked breath of something big and scared in the darkness. Storm, I whisper, my voice foreign in my mouth. It's me. I'm here. He emerges from the gloom, black coat slick with rain, mane tangled and wild. His eyes find mine, huge, white-ringed, frantic. I step forward, and he steps back, snorting, pawing at the straw. For a moment, I think he might bolt. For a moment, I almost want him to, but then something shifts. Storm edges closer, trembling, nostrils flaring. His gaze locks onto mine as if begging me to understand. I'm sorry, I whisper, and the words are for both of us. A flash of lightning turns the world white. Thunder rattles the barn, and Storm lurches sideways, pressing his massive body against the stall. I reach out, a hand shaking, and for a split second, I wish I was back in the city, somewhere with noise and people and the comfort of pretending to be okay, but I'm not. I'm here. And so is he. I kneel, boots sinking into the straw, trying to steady my breathing. Storm towers over me, but I see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I carry inside me, every hour of every day. His chest heaves, his sides damp with sweat and rain. Then it happens. I feel it before I see it. Something soft brushes my leg, low and gentle. At first, I flinch, ready to bolt, to run, to escape like always. But it's not a hand. Not a ghost. Not some monster from the storm. But it's Storm's muzzle, warm, velvet, insistent. He nudges my thigh, then pauses, his breath hot against my soaked jeans. The world holds its breath. My fear, so sharp, so familiar, suddenly falters, replaced by something I haven't felt in months, connection. I let myself exhale, shaky and slow. Storm's nose lingers against my leg, grounding me in the here and now. It's such a small gesture, but it shatters something in me, a dam I didn't know I'd built. I realize how long it's been since anyone touched me, even by accident. How long I've gone without letting myself be seen. I blink back tears, swallowing hard. It's okay, I say, to him, to me, to the universe. We're okay. For a moment, we're both still. The storm rages outside, rain hammering the tin roof, wind howling through cracks in the wood. But in the center of it all, I am not alone. Not entirely. Storm shifts, pressing closer, his weight a solid reassurance against my side. I sink my fingers into his mane, feeling the strength and life pulsing beneath his skin. I'm here. I repeat, louder this time. My voice doesn't tremble. I'm not leaving. Maybe it's a promise. Maybe it's a plea as Storm breathes out, a long, shuddering sigh that matches my own. The tension in his body slowly drains away, replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. I rest my forehead against his neck, letting the tears come. They're hot, silent, unstoppable. For the first time in a long time, I don't try to hide. Memories flicker through my mind, a little girl on a different horse, sunlight in her hair, laughter echoing across green fields. My mother's voice, warm and distant, "You're braver than you think." How long since I've believed that? I don't know how long we stay like that. Me kneeling in the straw, Storm's breath warm on my skin, the two of us holding each other steady against a world we can't control. Time warps and folds, measured only by the rhythm of his heartbeat, the slow calming of mine. The storm passes, eventually. It always does. When I finally stand, my legs are numb, my clothes heavy with rain and tears. Storm follows me to the door, nosing my arm as if to say, "Don't go too far." I won't, I promise, even though I'm not sure I can keep it. Back in the kitchen, I peel off my wet clothes and wrap myself in a blanket. I stare out the window, watching the clouds break apart, stars flickering into view. For the first time since moving here, I feel something like hope, a tiny ember, fragile but real. Something touched my leg tonight. Something real, something wild, something honest. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't my fear. It was my horse, my stubborn, beautiful, broken horse, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough to bring me back to life. Sometimes, the things that haunt us are invisible. Sometimes they have a name. That night, after Storm's touch grounded me, I sat awake until the sun began to bleed over the horizon, casting the fields in a cold, bruised light. I didn't dare close my eyes. The memory of his velvet muzzle pressing into my thigh replayed on a loop, soft, insistent, undeniably real. I found myself reaching down, tracing the damp outline his touch had left on my jeans, as if to make sure I hadn't dreamed it. What had he felt, out there in the thunder and the dark? Was it fear, like mine? Or something else, some wordless understanding, deeper than language, that he'd reached for me when I needed him most? I barely recognized the woman in the cracked bathroom mirror the next morning, hair matted, eyes red, skin washed pale by exhaustion and tears. I almost laughed. If there's any certainty about living alone in the country, it's that no one cares how you look. No one except your own reflection. And maybe your horse. Coffee brewed on the stove. The silence of the kitchen seemed heavier after last night, like the storm had wrung something loose in the bones of the old house. I should have felt relieved. Storm was safe, I was safe, the world had not collapsed. Instead, every muscle in my body remained tense, coiled, ready to. Our UNMY phone, untouched since yesterday, blinked with notifications. I didn't look. Instead, I forced myself to eat a stale piece of toast and stepped into my boots, already knowing where I needed to go. The barn looked the way I'd left it, doors half closed, straw scattered, the faint, sour tang of rain, and horse sweat in the air. Storm stood in the shadows, ears pricked, as if he'd been waiting for me all night. "Hey, boy," I murmured, voice hoarse. My fingers trembled as I reached for his halter. "Did you sleep at all?" Storm didn't answer, obviously, but he flicked his ears, watching me with that old, searching intensity. I set about my chores, moving in autopilot, topping up hay, changing water, mucking out the mess the storm had left behind. All the while, I felt his eyes on me, a weight both comforting and unsettling. I was halfway through sweeping when it happened again. I was crouched beside the stall, scraping at a stubborn patch of mud, when Storm's nose brushed my leg. Not a nudge this time, a gentle, almost apologetic sweep along my calf. My breath caught. I froze, body taut as a wire. This should have been normal. Horses are curious, tactile creatures. But there was nothing casual about this. The barn was silent. Storm's touch was slow, deliberate, as if he was checking to make sure I was still real. I didn't move. Couldn't. Every muscle locked, mind racing with 1,000 questions I didn't know how to ask. What do you want from me? What are you trying to say? Storm lingered for a heartbeat longer, then drew back. He shook his head, tossing his mane. But his eyes never left mine. In that moment, I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in months. Maybe years. I let out a shaky laugh, tears burning the corners of my eyes. You're full of surprises, aren't you? I whispered. I wish I understood what you're thinking. He only blinked, then turned to nose at his hay. The spell broke, but the feeling stayed. I tried to finish the chores, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every shadow in the barn seemed charged with possibility, every sound too loud or too soft. My mind pinged between past and present, old wounds reopening, memories rising unwanted. A girl, small and brave, pressed close to her first pony's side. Her mother laughing in the sunlight, braiding her hair. The day her father left. The screaming, the slammed doors, the broken promises. The way she'd run to the barn and buried her face in a horse's mane, wishing the world would disappear. Some pains never heal, only change shape. Sometimes they become the reason you keep your heart closed tight. By noon, the sky had cleared. I led Storm out to the paddock, hoping the fresh air would ease his tension, and mine. The grass was wet, dotted with broken branches and leaves stripped by the wind. Storm snorted, neck arched, scanning the horizon as if waiting for another storm to break. I leaned on the fence, breath pluming in the cool morning air, watching him graze. For a moment, I let myself believe I could stay here forever, just me and the horse, no world beyond the fence, but the ache in my chest wouldn't fade. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through unread messages. Mom, are you okay? You haven't answered in days. Sarah, we miss you. Let's video chat soon. Unknown, final notice, utility bill due. I turned the phone over, screen down, and pressed my forehead to the splintered wood. The weight of expectation, family, friends, the world I'd left behind, felt heavier than ever as Storm, halfway across the paddock, lifted his head. He watched me, ears swiveling, as if he could hear the storm brewing inside my chest. A sudden surge of emotion rose in my throat, grief, regret, anger, fear, all tangled and raw. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. A movement caught my eye, a Storm trotting over, eyes wide, muscles quivering. He stopped just in front of me, blowing hot breath against my hands. Without thinking, I reached out, sinking my fingers into his mane. I'm sorry, I whispered, voice shaking. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here. Storm pressed closer, his shoulder nudging my arm. He didn't flinch at my tears, didn't turn away from the mess of emotion radiating off me. If anything, he seemed to lean in, as if trying to shoulder the weight himself. For a moment, I let myself believe he could, but the spell broke when my phone buzzed again, an urgent, insistent vibration that shattered the fragile peace. I ignored it. Couldn't let go of Storm, not yet. We stayed that way for a long time, me clutching his mane like a lifeline, him standing steady as a mountain. Eventually, my tears dried. The panic faded to a low hum. I stepped back, wiping my face, embarrassed by my weakness. You must think I'm ridiculous, I muttered. Storm only snorted, flicking his tail, as if to say he'd seen far worse. The day wore on, heavy with humidity and after storm quiet. I forced myself to focus on chores, fixing the fence, cleaning, tack, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling, but Storm followed me everywhere. Not just in the way of a horse hoping for treats, but with a purpose I couldn't name. Every time I paused, he was there, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. If I sat, he'd hover just close enough to touch. If I walked away, he'd shadow me. Head low, steps matched to mine. I tried to laugh it off. "You're stuck to me like glue," I teased. But inside, the feeling was different and heavier, more urgent. By late afternoon, exhaustion dragged at my bones. I retreated to the porch. Sinking into an old wicker chair, knees pulled to my chest. The air smelled of wet earth and horses. The only sounds were birds, distant and tentative, and the slow clop of Storm's hooves as he circled the yard. For the first time in weeks, I let myself be still. I watched the clouds shift, sunlight slicing through the gray. I let the ache in my chest settle. I thought about leaving, packing up, driving back to the city, pretending none of this had happened, but I didn't move instead. I watched Storm. I watched the way he moved, careful, deliberate, always glancing back at me, as if afraid I'd disappear if he looked away. It wasn't until dusk that I realized I'd been holding my breath all day. I stood, stretching tired muscles, and made my way back toward the barn. Storm followed, silent as a shadow. In the dim light, he seemed larger than life, a dark shape against the gathering night. At the door, I hesitated. Storm brushed past me, slipping inside as if he belonged there more than I did. I followed, heart pounding, every sense stretched. Thin inside, the barn was warm and dark, the air thick with the smell of hay and horse. I reached for the light, but something stopped me. I stood in the shadows, listening to Storm's breath, the steady stamp of his hooves. Then I felt it again. A soft, deliberate touch against my leg, this time, firmer, as if Storm was reminding me that I was here, that I was real, that I belonged. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. The world narrowed to the point of contact, to the warmth and weight of him pressed against me. In that moment, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was standing still, letting myself be held, by this horse, by this place, by the promise that maybe, just maybe, I could start again. For the first time since arriving at the farm, I let myself hope. I sank down beside him, leaning into the comfort of his body, and whispered, "Thank you." Storm nickered softly, breath tickling my hair. I closed my eyes, letting the world fall away, held together by the gentle touch of a horse who refused to let me disappear. They say loneliness grows roots if you let it. I'd always believed I could outwalk mine, keep moving fast enough that nothing could catch up, not memories, not regret, not the empty ache that settled deep inside my bones. But the truth is, when you stand still long enough, you start to see yourself in ways you never wanted to. It was day 5 since the storm, and I hadn't left the farm even once. I tried to tell myself that was strength, not fear. That staying here, hidden, quiet, invisible, was what I needed to heal. In reality, I was stalling. The world outside the fence had become impossibly large and loud, filled with too many people who knew too many pieces of my story. Inside these boundaries, there was only Storm and me. The routines of the farm became my entire world: oats measured into buckets, hay forked into tidy piles, water sloshing heavy in old rubber tubs. There was comfort in it, a rhythm older than any pain. If I kept moving, kept busy, I didn't have to feel anything. But Storm, he had other plans. From the moment the sun slipped above the fields, he shadowed my every step. He watched me with unblinking eyes as I scrubbed water buckets, nudged my shoulder while I heaved hay bales, pressed close enough to fog the glass when I lingered at the kitchen window. Sometimes it was almost comical. I'd step outside for air, only to find him planted square in the path, head cocked, waiting. The strangest part was how deliberate it felt. Horses were herd animals, sure, but this was different. This was vigilant, persistent, bordering on obsession. And, if I was honest, it made me nervous. I started finding ways to avoid him. I moved quietly, shut doors gently, tiptoed through the garden so as not to draw his attention. If he was grazing in the lower paddock, I'd take the long route around the barn. Sometimes, for a blessed moment, I'd convince myself he'd lost interest. That he was simply a horse, living his simple, untroubled life. But every evening, just as dusk turned the world blue and shadowed, he'd reappear, by the porch, at the window, blocking the gate with his massive body as if daring me to pass. The message was always the same: I see you. I'm not leaving. That night, the air was thick and electric, heavy with the promise of another storm. I sat curled on the porch, knees pulled to my chest, pretending to read a battered paperback I'd found in the attic. The words blurred and danced. My thoughts drifted back to the city, to the broken apartment I'd left behind, to the friends who still texted, "Miss you," but never called. A twig snapped in the darkness. I looked up. Storm stood just beyond the pool of porch light. Almost spectral, his coat shining in the damp air. "You again," I said, not unkindly. "Don't you ever get tired of me?" He took a step closer, the boards creaking under his weight. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, two souls trapped in the same silent orbit. I set the book aside, sudden frustration burning in my chest. "I don't need you to fix me," I said, my voice cracking in the night. "You can't. Nobody can." Storm only blinked, shifting his weight, unbothered by my outburst. I stood abruptly, nerves fraying. "Go on, then. Go eat, go run, go be a horse." "I don't want," my voice faltered. I didn't even know what I was saying. Really. I just needed to say something, to prove I still existed, but Storm didn't budge. Instead, he reached out, muzzle searching, and touched my knee with that same quiet insistence as before. It was all I could do not to break down on the spot. I stumbled backward, shaking off his touch. "Please," I whispered, barely audible. "Please, just leave me alone." But he wouldn't. I escaped inside, slamming the door, a childish gesture, instantly regretted. Through the glass, I watched as Storm paced the porch, then settled with a heavy sigh, as if he meant to outweigh all my stubbornness. For the next hour, I paced too, the old farmhouse groaning with every step. I could feel his presence outside, steady, patient, a promise that refused to fade. Finally, the sky cracked open, thunder rolling across the fields. Rain hammered the roof, loud enough to drown out thought. I pressed my forehead to the window and watched Storm stand in the downpour, head bowed, refusing the shelter of his barn. He wouldn't leave, even when the world turned wild around him. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed an old coat and burst onto the porch, the storm slapping my face, hair plastered to my cheeks. "Fine," I yelled, voice swallowed by wind and water. "You win. You always win." Storm met me halfway, eyes wide, breath steaming in the cold. I sank down beside him, heedless of the mud and rain, and buried my face in his mane. "I don't know how to be alone," I confessed, the words tumbling out in fits and starts. "But I'm not good at being together either. I'm not good at much of anything." He pressed his head into my shoulder, steady and unyielding. I let the sobs come, loud, ugly, unashamed. The storm raged on, but inside its heart was a quiet space, carved out by a horse who refused to leave me. Time lost all meaning. Maybe it was minutes. Maybe it was hours. But when I finally looked up, the rain had softened to a whisper. Storm blinked at me, patient as the dawn. "I'm sorry," I said again. "For pushing you away. For making everything so hard." He only breathed, the simplest answer in the world. Together, we walked back to the barn, him nudging me forward, step by sodden step. I tucked him into his stall, rubbing him down with a towel, fingers shaking from cold and relief. When I finally closed the gate, he whickered softly, as if to say, "I'm here. I always will be." Back in the kitchen, I stared at my reflection in the rain-streaked glass. For the first time, I saw something besides fear. Looking back, I saw hope. The next morning, the world was washed clean. Sunlight broke through the clouds, laying gold across the paddocks. I moved through chores in a daze, every sense sharpened by exhaustion and relief. Storm trailed me less closely now, still present, but less insistent. I realized, with a jolt, that maybe he trusted I wouldn't disappear if he let me out of his sight. After lunch, I wandered to the back fence, where the land sloped down to a wild tangle of blackberry bushes and scrub. The wind danced through my hair, and for once, I let myself close my eyes and just breathe. That a voice startled me, gravelly, amused. "You the new owner?" I spun. A man stood on the other side of the fence, leaning on a battered truck. He wore a faded cap and had the sunburned look of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. Yes, I stammered. "I'm Emma." He grinned, easy and unthreatening. Name's Bill. I own the place down the road. Thought I'd come see who was crazy enough to move out here this time of year. We talked, awkward at first, then easier. Bill asked about the farm, about Storm. I told him just enough to be polite. When I mentioned Storm's devotion, Bill laughed. Horses no, he said simply. They pick their people. Sometimes. You don't get a choice. I watched Storm graze, far across the field, his coat glinting in the sun. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain or apologize for the strange bond between us. As Bill left, he called over his shoulder, you ever need help, don't wait to ask. This place can get lonely. I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. That night, I sat on the porch again. Storm wandered over, but this time, he stood a little apart, giving me space. I looked at him, really looked, and realized he was waiting for me, not the other way around. I patted my knee, an invitation. He came to me, gentle as rain. Thank you, I whispered. For not letting me hide. As darkness fell, I leaned against his warm side, letting myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could belong here. After all, there are storms you see coming from miles away, dark clouds building, a warning in the wind. And then there are storms that sneak up quietly, crawling out from under your skin, brewing in the places no one else can see. That morning, the world felt strangely fragile. Like a painting hung askew. Light shimmered over the wet grass, spiderwebs glistened between fence rails, and birds sang sharp, frantic songs. I woke before dawn with a headache pounding in my temples, a warning I'd learned not to ignore. The air was too still. Something was coming. Something I couldn't name. By noon, the sky was bruised with purple clouds. The wind, which had carried the scent of summer for days, shifted. Now it smelled of ozone, sharp and biting, tinged with the coppery warning of rain. I moved through my chores with a jittery energy I couldn't shake. Even Storm was restless. He paced the paddock, nostrils flaring, ears flicking at every snap of thunder on the horizon. I tried to act normal, whistling softly as I mucked stalls, but my hands shook and my breath felt thin. When I looked at Storm, I saw my own unease reflected back in his wild, intelligent eyes. It was as if he knew, too, that the ground was about to shift beneath our feet. The first rumble of thunder sent a shiver through the barn. Storm threw his head, stamping the dirt, and for a moment I wondered if he might bolt right through the fence. I dropped my pitchfork and hurried to his side, murmuring nonsense words. My hands were clumsy on his halter, but he stood, rigid. Trembling like a wire pulled too tight. I know, boy, I whispered, burying my face in his mane. I feel it, too. The sky opened all at once. Rain crashed down, deafening, slamming against the tin roof until the noise blotted out every thought. Water pooled beneath the doors, trickling across the floor, turning straw to sludge. I should have run for the house, but something stopped me, something more powerful than fear. I couldn't leave Storm, not when every muscle in his body screamed of panic. So I stayed, crouched in the straw, one hand buried in his mane, the other pressed flat against his chest. My heartbeat thundered in time with the storm. The lights flickered, once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the barn, punctuated only by the ghostly blue-white of lightning. Storm pressed close, his weight warm and solid against my side. I realized I was holding my breath. A flash of memory struck, my mother's voice years ago, soothing a crying child in the dark. We're safe here. We're together. I never believed her. Safety had always been a trick of the light, a story told to calm the desperate, but here, now, in the pitch black with Storm's breath hot against my neck, I wanted to believe it more than anything. Thunder boomed so close the barn shook. Storm snorted, pawing at the ground, panic rising. I grabbed his halter with both hands, feeling his terror like it was my own. My voice cracked as I tried to soothe him, but the words tumbled out shaky and thin. It's okay, I've got you, I whispered, more to myself than him. The wind howled, ripping at the roof, shuddering the walls. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the unmistakable sound of splitting wood. My heart leapt into my throat. Had the old oak by the fence finally fallen? What if it hit the power lines, the fence, the house? A flicker of pure panic rushed through me, irrational, wild. What if we were trapped? What if nobody knew we were here? The world outside my barn suddenly felt 1,000 miles wide and terrifyingly empty. Storm's breathing grew ragged. He twisted in my grip, muscles bunching under my hands. I realized too late that the barn door, barely latched, was rattling on its hinges. A blast of wind tore it open, and for a heartbeat I saw the storm in all its fury, rain flying sideways. Branches whipping, the landscape blurred and wild. Before I could think, Storm lunged, trying to follow his ancient instincts, run, escape, flee to anywhere but here. I threw my arms around his neck, anchoring myself to his panic. No. I cried, my voice swallowed by the roar of the wind. Stay with me, please, Storm, stay. For one terrifying second, I thought I'd lose him. He bucked, reared, front. Hooves slicing the air, eyes rolling white with terror. My hands slipped. Mud and rain slicked my jeans, soaked my skin, made every muscle scream. My body wanted to run, to let go and save myself, but something inside me held on. I clung to Storm's neck, legs numb, fingers digging into his mane. I need you. I sobbed, the words ripped from somewhere deeper than fear. Don't leave me, don't leave me alone. He stopped fighting. His body shuddered, then stilled. He pressed his muzzle hard against my shoulder, chest heaving, breath blowing hot and desperate against my ear. For a moment, I thought we might both collapse. We slid down together into the straw, him lying awkwardly on his side, me curled beside him, arms wrapped around his neck. The barn door flapped in the wind, the world outside chaos and noise, but inside the stall, time slowed. I pressed my forehead to his, whispering over and over, "It's okay, you're safe, I've got you, I'm here." My mind spun with everything. I tried to outrun the hollow echo of city life, the disappointment in my mother's eyes, the way my father's absence had burned a hole right through my chest. I'd spent years believing that nobody would ever stay for me. That everyone leaves, eventually, but Storm didn't leave. He pressed his body tighter against mine, pinning my leg gently beneath his own, a living barrier between me and the storm. His breath steadied, then mine did too. In the darkness, I felt his heart beating, loud, steady, a metronome of survival. Though I'd always thought I needed to be strong for everyone else. But as the hours dragged on, I realized I didn't need to be anyone's hero. I just needed not to let go. The rain kept coming, relentless. Water seeped under the barn walls, puddling in the straw. Every so often, I'd feel Storm shift, as if checking to make sure I was still there. Once, half asleep, I felt his muzzle trace my leg again, a soft reminder, "You're not alone. I'm still here." I wept, quiet tears, mingling with rain and horse sweat and straw. It wasn't grief anymore. It was release. Sometime near dawn, the wind died. The rain eased to a whisper. The storm was over. I struggled to my feet, legs stiff and aching, body trembling from cold and adrenaline. Storm rose beside me, shaking water from his coat, eyes bright and alert. We stood together in the gray pre-dawn, two survivors in a battered, muddy world. I stepped outside, blinking at the debris scattered across the yard. Branches, leaves, torn roofing, chaos, but also proof we'd made it through. Storm followed me into the pale light, nose bumping my shoulder. In the distance, I heard a truck engine, Bill, probably, coming to check if I was still alive. Relief flooded me, but I didn't run to meet him. I turned, pressed my face into Storm's neck, and let myself be held, just for one more moment. "Thank you," I whispered, voice cracking. "For not letting go." Storm nickered softly, brushing my leg once more as if sealing a promise. Later, as Bill helped me clear the branches and check the fences, I caught him watching me and Storm with a knowing smile. "You're tough," he said, not unkindly. "But you don't always have to be." For the first time, I believed him. Today, as the sun finally broke through, I realized the truth. The worst storms aren't outside, they're inside, twisting up everything you thought you knew about yourself. But sometimes, when the world falls apart, someone wild, someone stubborn, someone with 4 hooves and a velvet nose, will stand beside you and show you what it means to survive. And if you're brave enough, you'll let them. You never really know the turning point while it's happening. It's only when the world Settles, when the quiet after the storm feels different than before, that you realize something in you has changed forever. After the flood, the farm took on a haunted beauty. Sunlight sparkled off puddles in the yard. Leaves stuck to window panes and fence rails. There was work everywhere, mud to shovel, broken branches to clear, fencing to repair. But beneath the chaos, I felt a hush, a deep, bone-deep stillness. It was like the land itself was catching its breath. Storm stayed close as I moved from task to task, his presence a silent promise. He'd become my shadow, my sentinel. Sometimes, as I knelt to dig roots free from the muck, I'd feel his nose brush my hair or his body sidle next to mine. The old me might have bristled at the closeness, called it a nuisance. Now, each touch grounded me, a living reminder that I was not, in fact, alone, but I couldn't shake the restlessness rising in my chest. It felt like a new storm gathering. This one not in the sky but inside me. I thought about the world beyond my fences, the messages still unanswered, the calls I ignored, the neighbors I kept at arm's length. The longer I stayed at the farm, the more I felt the weight of all the things I was running from. Storm could stand with me through thunder and darkness, but there were places even he couldn't follow. I didn't know it yet, but the night would soon force me to choose, to keep running, or to turn and face the life waiting for me beyond the safe circle of his touch. It began with a knock. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing mud from my hands, when the sound echoed through the house. Not a gentle tap, 3 sharp raps, urgent and out of place in the soft summer dusk. I froze, every muscle snapping tight. Nobody visits this late, I thought. Nobody ever visits at all. My heart hammered. I peeked through the window, hands trembling. A figure stood at the gate, a woman, maybe in her 40s, hair in a messy ponytail, holding a clipboard. A car idled on the gravel drive. Next to her, a man in a uniform checked his phone, frowning at the fading light. My chest went cold. Utility company? Some kind of inspection? Or something worse? Storm appeared at the edge of the paddock, head high, tail lashing. He snorted, stamping the ground, his unease a mirror of my own. The woman spotted me at the window and waved, all business. Hello. I'm with the county. We're checking properties after the storm, making sure everyone's safe. Are you all right? Her voice was friendly, but something in it, too loud, too cheerful, set my nerves on edge. I forced the door open, stepping onto the porch. We're fine, I said, voice thin. Just some branches down. The man looked up from his phone, assessing me with a tired smile. Mind if we look around? There's been flooding down by the creek. Some folks are still trapped. I hesitated. All my instincts screamed to retreat, to pull the old habits of hiding tighter around me. But the world wouldn't let me disappear. Not tonight. Go ahead, I managed. I'll show you the lower pasture. As I led them through the yard, Storm followed, head over the fence, eyes never leaving me. The officials walked the fence line, checking for downed power lines, broken pipes. They asked questions. How long had I lived here? Did I have family? Did I need help? Their kindness was suffocating. I answered in half-truths, wishing for invisibility. The gate, the woman smiled, tapping her clipboard. You're tougher than you look. But if you need anything, don't wait to ask. They left as quickly as they'd come, their voices fading into the engine's roar, but the quiet that returned wasn't comforting. Instead, it pressed in from all sides, heavy, expectant, as if the house itself was waiting for me to move it inside. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Saw the storms on the news. Are you okay? Please call me, Em. I'm worried. The ache in my chest sharpened. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream, or cry, or run until the feeling went numb, but something stopped me. Out the window, Storm stood by the gate, still as a statue, watching the road where the officials had disappeared. The dying sun painted his coat gold, outlined every muscle in molten light. He looked both wild and impossibly gentle. I grabbed my jacket and boots, heart pounding, and ran outside. The field felt different at dusk. The world was quieter, but not safe. The air was thick, every shadow sharp, every sound amplified. I crossed The grass on trembling legs, unsure if I was running towards something or away from it, Storm met me halfway, blowing hot breath against my cheek. I buried my face in his mane, clutching fistfuls of his tangled hair. For a long time, I just stood there, letting the fear and shame drain out of me, soaking into the earth at my feet, but even here, beside him, I couldn't stop the storm inside. I can't do it, I whispered, voice cracking. I can't keep hiding. I'm so tired, Storm. I'm so scared all the time. He pressed his body into mine, warm and solid, pinning my leg gently with his weight, the same way he had that first night in the barn. A wave of emotion broke over me, too big to hold back. I sank to the ground, wrapping my arms around his neck. The sun dropped lower, shadows climbing up my legs, cool air settling on my skin. For a moment, I thought I could just disappear, sink into the grass, become another secret in the dark. But Storm wouldn't let me. He pawed at my knee, snorting softly, then dropped to his knees beside me, a rare, awkward gesture for a horse, as if he understood exactly how close I was to breaking. I laughed through my tears, clutching him tighter. You're ridiculous, I sobbed. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be the normal one. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned into me, his huge head in my lap, breath warming my shaking hands. I felt the solid, undeniable weight of him, real in here and refusing to leave. That's when it happened. On a noise, a crash from the woods at the edge of the pasture. Branches breaking. The unmistakable sound of something large moving through the trees, every muscle in my body tensed. Coyotes? A wild dog? Or just a deer, startled by the storm's aftermath? My heart jackhammered. I looked to Storm, he'd gone rigid, ears pinned, eyes locked on the darkness. He rose first, slow and deliberate, placing himself between me and the trees. I stood too, shoving my fear aside. We waited together, breath held, bodies pressed close. The crashing stopped. Only silence remained, thick, heavy, ringing in my ears. Slowly, I relaxed. The world returned in pieces, the cool grass under my feet, the warmth of Storm's body against mine, the realization that I hadn't run. Not this time. I understood then, finally, what Storm had tried to teach me. His touch, those gentle, stubborn nudges, had never been about saving me from the outside world. He was teaching me how to stay. How to stand my ground when everything in me screamed to disappear. That night, I led him back to the barn, my hand buried in his mane. The stars burned overhead, the house glowed soft with lamplight, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to close the door behind me. Inside, I sat on the barn floor, Storm curled around me, and dialed my mother's number. The phone rang. Once, twice. Emma. Her voice, choked with hope and fear. I'm okay, I said. I'm still here. We talked for a long time. I told her about the storm, about the barn, about the horse who wouldn't let me disappear. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I told her enough. When I hung up, the weight in my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Storm whickered, nuzzling my arm. I leaned into his warmth and whispered, "Thank you, old friend." Outside, the wind rose, but this time I was ready. I stood with Storm in the darkness, the two of us unbroken, unhidden, and unafraid. I knew storms would come again, inside and out. I knew I'd still have days when I wanted to run. But now, whenever the shadows gathered, I'd remember the feel of Storm's touch on my leg, gentle, stubborn, impossible to ignore, and I would stay. I would let myself be seen, because something had touched my leg, and it was my horse. But what truly changed me was that I finally let him touch my heart, and